São Tomé and Príncipe. Between dreamlike beaches and unspoiled rainforest, adventurous jungle trails and breathtaking phonolite towers, São Tomé and Príncipe is a well-kept secret. Follow us on our journey as we experience the natural treasures of this rarely visited island nation. The documentary was produced in collaboration with HBD Príncipe. Located off the West African coastline in the Gulf of Guinea, São Tomé and Príncipe is the second smallest country in Africa. The island state is part of the Cameroon Line, a long chain of extinct volcanoes that formed 30 million years ago. Of the two main islands, São Tomé is much more developed, whereas smaller Príncipe remains little explored. For that very reason, we decided to start our trip on the latter. To get there, we boarded a small propeller plane from São Tomé before touching down 40 minutes later. Being picked up directly at the airport, we started the journey to our first accommodation. Initially, the road was in good condition, but it soon got rather bumpy. This was especially true once we headed on a narrow and winding forest trail. Eventually, we arrived at Sundy Praia, our jungle hideaway for the next 3 nights. All of the lodge's tented villas are deeply embedded in the surrounding vegetation. Their canvas roofs allow for a truly immersive nature experience. Stepping into our villa, we were immediately delighted by the comfortable luxury. The room offered all the amenities for an unforgettable honeymoon, or simply a relaxing vacation. Best of all, we had a direct view of the jungle through the large windows. As its name suggests, Sundy Praia sits directly on a beach. The beautiful yellow sand is a characteristic feature of the coastline. Lounging in some chairs, we listen to the rhythmic sound of the waves and the singing of the birds, while trying to slowly get used to the humidity. The climate of both São Tomé and Príncipe is tropical, meaning hot and humid. The temperature varies little year-round, and rain falls abundantly, resulting in lush plant growth. As part of the moist, lowland forest ecoregion, both islands abound in tropical vegetation. Due to their remote location, several endemic plant species developed throughout the millennia, perfectly adapting to the local conditions. Up until recently, a lot of wilderness remained, especially on Príncipe. But this untouched nature was under threat in 2010, when the national government contemplated the clearing of 1,000 hectares of land for a palm oil plantation. Luckily, the local government of Príncipe opposed the plan, believing that this would jeopardize the long-term development of the island. To preserve the natural heritage, the only course of action was sustainable tourism. HBD, a company whose name plays on the historic mapmaker's expression "Here be dragons," invested in the local economy by opening several hotels, as well as supporting environmental and social initiatives. Today, guests get to enjoy the comforts of a high-end eco-resort, while being serenaded by a natural orchestra. Sitting down on our spacious outdoor terrace, I let myself be enchanted by this calming atmosphere. Before long, however, I noticed some movement. The Príncipe starling is one of several endemic bird species on the island. Another one is the rather skittish Príncipe weaver. Equally treated as a distinct subspecies is the São Tomé lemon dove. The most unusual bird we saw was, without a doubt, the blue-breasted kingfisher. While some individuals sport very colorful breasts, others are much less striking. As part of the subfamily of tree kingfishers, this bird is a wait-and-watch predator that can often be seen perching on branches. As the daylight slowly faded, we also discovered a couple of Mona monkeys, which, unlike the birds, are not native to the island.
Walking on this trail at night, we have to be somewhat careful, at least as long as we don't want to hear a sudden crack. The reason for that is the presence of thousands of land crabs that live in the surrounding forest. They come out of their burrows at dusk to forage for plant materials, berries, flowers and so on, and we surely don't want to be responsible for their last supper.
The next morning we were welcomed by sunshine and a calm sea, which proved to be perfect for a boat outing. Our plan was to follow the northern coastline to visit several pristine beaches. First, however, we enjoyed the view of the tree-covered shore. Sometime later, we approached Bom Bom, one of the islets making up the Príncipe archipelago. The nearby beach, Praia Bom Bom, marked our first landfall. With the waves gently lapping ashore, we very much enjoyed the sea breeze. Our second landing followed shortly after, when we approached the mesmerizing Praia Banana. This exceptionally pretty beach is hidden in a natural cove and flanked by dark rocks, hinting at the volcanic origin of the island. Prominently sitting on one of these rocks was a large red crab. This was clearly its territory, as it showed no signs of fear at all. When seen from above, the turquoise color of the water forms an extraordinary contrast to the whitish sand and the black rocks. Combined with the lavish green of the surrounding vegetation, this is a stunning scenery. our guides treated us to a chilled coconut, which was a perfect snack on this sunny day. The last beach we visited was Praia Boi. Once more, we were all alone, sitting below gently swaying palm trees in a picture-perfect landscape. To us, this was the most mesmerizing of all beaches. Its remote location, paired with the clear water and white sand, made for a truly captivating scenery. Alongside the rest of Príncipe, this landscape has been protected as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve since 2012. As such, the biodiversity of the island's terrestrial and marine ecosystems has been recognized. This, alongside the local conservation efforts, gives us hope that Príncipe will remain the unspoiled island paradise that its inhabitants have come to love. Of course, not every day is quite as sunny. Príncipe is well known for its abundant rainfall, and the next morning we experienced the reason for the vegetation's intense color. Sometimes such a shower will be over in 15 minutes. However, this one turned out to be a bit more persistent. Luckily, listening to the patter of the rain on the tent canvas was extremely relaxing. The next day, all the rain was forgotten, so we decided to visit Ribeira Izé. This lost city has been entirely reclaimed by the jungle. It is widely thought that this is the site of the island's first settlement. Today, only the crumbling ruins of the former Catholic Church remain. Throughout its century-long decline, large trees have wrapped their gnarled roots around the stone foundations. Naturally, this place exudes a very special atmosphere, so we lingered for a long time, listening to the sounds of the ocean and forest. To also experience some more homely settlements, we headed on an excursion to the island's capital. Affectionately known as the smallest city in the world, Santo António is the home of most of Príncipe's inhabitants. Despite that, barely 2,500 people live in town. Walking around on a Saturday morning, even the city's main square was entirely deserted. Santo António's most striking building is undoubtedly the blue and white Church of Our Lady of the Rosary. This Catholic church is a symbol of the island's colonial heritage. There are plans to restore more of the historic buildings, which will further increase the charm of the little town. Our casual stroll eventually brought us to the Rio Papagaio, a stream that emerges from the peaks on the southern half of the island. Following a quick spin around town, we made our way to Roça Paciencia. This former plantation has been partially rebuilt and its gardens are tended once more. From Paciencia, the increasingly rough road continues to Belo Monte. Sitting high above the ocean, several viewpoints offer a sweeping panorama of stunning beaches and clear water. After 3 nights at Sundy Praia, we moved up the hill to Roça Sundy. During colonial times, Roça Sundy was a huge producer of cocoa. After falling into complete disrepair, the property is now slowly being restored. So far, the master house and several adjacent buildings have been turned into a modern hotel. Nonetheless, several ruins remain in the direct vicinity. These provide a fascinating glimpse into the past, when the plantation was run by the Portuguese. Among the ruins that so far remain is a giant stable that used to house horses and livestock. Directly next to it, the former church of the settlement remains quite impressive. Just outside the perimeter of the plantation, we also came upon the Praia Hospital. This building has lost most of its roof and will require a lot of restoration work. At the time of our visit, most of the effort focused on the former slave quarters, which in the past were the lodging of hundreds of plantation workers.
When the Portuguese arrived here, they arrived in São Tomé in 15th century. When they arrived, they tried to establish in the islands, but it was not possible because of no condition for living. So, and some kind of diseases like malaria and so on and so forth, it was not possible for them. And it was very humid as well. They could only establish in the third time. It was in 1493. From that time, they started the plantation of sugarcane that they brought from Madeira Island, the island that belonged to Portugal. Yes, they brought it from there and started the plantation. And some years later, we became the biggest producer of the sugarcane in the world, São Tomé and Príncipe. Yes, but we lost this title for Brazil. Some years later, they brought cocoa. They brought it, it was in 1819. Some years later, we once more became the biggest producer of the cocoa in the world. First with sugarcane and after with cocoa. But we lost this title once more for Ivory Coast and Ghana. And nowadays, they are the biggest producer of the cocoa in the world. If you look at our flag, we have green, yellow, black, and red. The yellow,
Cocoa,
yes, is representing the cocoa that, yes, that in the past was our wealth. This 2-star is the both islands, yes, and the red color is those who gave their blood for this country. And the green, the nature.
Yeah.
In 1919, the island of Príncipe, and more specifically this Roça, was the site of a scientific breakthrough. Because a couple of years prior, Albert Einstein had formulated his theory of general relativity, which personally I don't claim to understand at all. But British astronomer Sir Arthur Eddington did, and he came to this island to prove it. What he did is he put up a telescope right here during a solar eclipse to take pictures of the stars, and then compared these with images taken 3 months prior, and thus proved that the theory is true, which to this day is a cornerstone of modern physics.
So far, we had stayed mostly in the northern part of the island. To get to the southern half, we hopped in a car again and drove the winding roads to Velu. The entire south of Príncipe is protected as part of the Obo Natural Park. This reserve is home to untouched rainforest, which is a haven for numerous plant and animal species. To get to the start of our hiking trail, we navigated remote roads which, over time, got properly rough. Once at the trailhead, we made our way into the lush jungle.
I'm sure you can tell by my face, but walking through the rainforest at 30 plus degrees Celsius with very high humidity and carrying a heavy tripod is properly tough work, but the forest surrounding us, absolutely beautiful.
Walking deeper and deeper into the rainforest, the air became incredibly heavy, as there was simply no breeze. Meanwhile, the intense green foliage enveloped us in an intimate embrace.
Up to 5 centuries ago, most of Príncipe would have looked and sounded just like this. Forests, birds singing, wildlife roaming freely, and especially no humans, because up to that point there hadn't been a single human settlement on the islands. It was only the Portuguese in the 1470s that started to colonize the islands and of course established plantations, which disrupted the natural ecosystem. But luckily today most of the island is protected with a large national park, which means that now we can enjoy this beautiful ecosystem in all of its glory.
The highlight of our hike was waiting at the end of the trail. Here we came upon the island's largest waterfall, which goes by the name Oquê Pipi. The water fell gracefully down the rock, not unlike a wheel, with its delicate droplets dancing enchantingly in the warm air. The gentle mist provided us with a very welcome refreshment after the strenuous climb. Even more refreshing, of course, is a dip in the pool. We spent more than 1 hour at the site, simply soaking in the scenery, all the while being surrounded by pristine rainforest. Our last expedition on Príncipe brought us along the western coastline. Our destination was Baia das Agulhas, the Bay of Needles. The name of this area stems from several phonolite towers, rising impressively from the surrounding jungle. Even though the weather was moody, the view of these volcanic relics was utterly breathtaking. Embedded in the primeval rainforest, this volcanic skyline undoubtedly offers the island's most impressive vista. almost the entire south of Príncipe is uninhabited. The only exceptions are fishermen living in tiny seaside settlements. As a result, the vegetation along the shore is a riotous gallimaufry of green. Moreover, the water in some parts of the bay is almost translucent. It was impossible to resist this alluring invitation, so I soon found myself with my head below the surface. And then it was time to say farewell. To get back to the main island, we once more boarded a small propeller plane for the 40-minute flight. Back at ground, we picked up our rental car for the next 5 days. Before long, we were engulfed by the controlled chaos of São Tomé, the eponymous capital city. With more than 70,000 inhabitants, this is by far the largest settlement in the country. Our goal for the day was to drive towards the center of the island. At first, the roads were in a fairly decent state, but as we traveled further inland, our journey became increasingly bumpy. Trusting our GPS a little too much, we accidentally ended up on a narrow plantation track. Eventually, we found the correct path though, continuously driving deeper into the highlands. Soon, we had left the last settlement behind, and were now surrounded by the rainforest of central São Tomé. The reason for our drive to this part of the island, aside from the pure excitement of doing it, was to visit Cascata de São Nicolau. This roadside waterfall plunges 60 meters into the depth. In the dry season, it sometimes turns into a small trickle, but after rain, it is an impressive sight. From the waterfall, we drove up even higher, passing coffee plantations along the way. The roads in this part of the island definitely require a sturdy vehicle, as they are anything but smooth. Traffic consists mostly of the odd chicken or shared taxis. Leaving the central highland behind, we continued our road trip towards the coastal settlement of Fernão Dias. Standing along the shore, we watched the movement of the waves, while waiting in front of a wooden enclosure. Inside this guarded area, there were several turtle nests. Of course, the turtles did not knowingly lay their eggs in this protected space. Instead, the eggs were dug up from the beach by volunteers of Programa Tato, an NGO working towards sea turtle conservation. To our luck, a batch of olive ridley sea turtles had hatched that very day. Most of the young turtles were still tired, moving around sluggishly. In the wild, this is the perfect opportunity for predators to swoop down on them. Fortunately, these hatchlings had all the time in the world. A couple of those that had hatched first were deemed fit enough to be released that day. After collecting them in a bucket filled with sand, we walked along the beach to an undisturbed area. Here, the little ones were pointed in the right direction, soon taking the first steps on their long and dangerous journey. The next day, we had set our eyes on the west of the island. Before driving down the coast, we visited Lagoa Azul. This sheltered bay is well known for its pebble beach and turquoise-colored water. Part of our West Coast adventure, we closely hugged the shoreline along a predominantly tarred road. Flanked by the Obo Natural Park of São Tomé, the drive was particularly pretty. There were few conventional sights along the way, but we regularly stopped to take in the ocean vista or to look at little waterfalls. The further southwest we drove, the more the asphalt gave way to a pothole-riddled gravel track. Along this route, we also passed through the only tunnel in all the country. Eventually, we arrived at the last settlement, where the road quite literally ends, before turning around and driving back again. Whereas the west coast lacks a road connection to the south, the same does not apply to the eastern side of the island. To also explore this part of the country, we set out along the busy coastal road. Just a short drive from town, we arrived at Boca do Inferno. Translating to Hell's Mouth, this rock formation is characterized by a narrow channel. Again and again, the waves push water into the opening, resulting in a geyser-like eruption. Boca do Inferno, the volcanic origin of the island is clearly recognizable. Eruptions of ages past have left behind an array of hexagonal basalt columns. This type of rock is typical for most of the local lava eruptions in the last 1 million years. While the surrounding coastline is rather scenic as well. Our following journey led us further south along a perfectly tarred road that became increasingly winding. As it was a clear day, plenty of locals were doing their laundry. Sometime later, we left the main road and followed a narrow trail through a plantation. That way, we arrived at a popular waterfall. Soon after, the previously splendid road was no more, as the track was now made up of a patchwork of gravel and asphalt. Before long, we looked at the most famous landmark of São Tomé. Standing 663 meters tall, Pico Cão Grande rises almost 400 meters above the surrounding jungle. Its unusual shape has evidently geological reasons. In short, magma hardened inside of the vent of an active volcano, resulting in this type of formation, which is commonly described as a volcanic plug peak. This needle-shaped mountain completely dominates the landscape. It regularly happens that the top of the peak is shrouded in clouds. But no matter if sunshine or rain, this mountain is an incredible place to visit. Just a short drive away, a narrow trail brought us to Praia Grande. Unlike the pebble coast further north, this beach, like most beaches in the south, is made up of soft sand. The following stretch of the road was a mix between halfway decent and off-road driving. After a while, we arrived in Porto Alegre, a village in the far south of the island. Most of the locals live from tourism and fishing, which explains the many boats in the harbor. Because our visit fell on a Saturday, a lot of kids were busy surfing or playing football. Driving through the village was a rather adventurous experience. The road was narrow, uneven and very busy, which made for an exhilarating drive. Unsurprisingly, the road condition did not improve on the subsequent forest trails. In fact, quite the opposite was true. Riddled by stones, potholes and mud, this is an area best explored in a 4x4. But as long as you accept the inevitable bumps as part of the journey, you'll be in for a good time. Taking the turn off to an even smaller forest track, we slowly approached a hidden beach. Known as Praia Piscina, this stretch of coastline is popular among both tourists and locals. A little further north, the much larger Praia Chalet is at least equally as scenic. Whereas there was no more road to explore at some point, we still had one last adventure ahead of us. Located south of the mainland, Ilhéu das Rolas is a satellite island of São Tomé. To get there, we embarked on a small boat that brought us across the often tumultuous channel. Luckily, on the day of our visit, the sea was calm, and so we smoothly approached the island. Once ashore, we set out on the coastal hiking trail that leads halfway around the islet. Glancing back, we caught a wonderful view of the mainland. Shortly after, we arrived at Praia Café, a beach renowned for its white sand and clear water. As soon as we had our share of the scenery, we continued through the forest. One thing we immediately noticed was the thousands of coconut husks. At some point, even the trail was covered in them. Aside from our fascination for the mountains of coconuts, there were also many other things to see. These included dense forests, picturesque coastlines, and particularly pretty bays.
Right now, my left leg is in the southern hemisphere, whereas my right leg is in the northern hemisphere. And the reason for that is the equator, which passes right through me, at least symbolically. The real one is slightly further downhill. But in general, the passing of the equator line through this little island makes this one of the most interesting places to visit in São Tomé and Príncipe.
The reason for the monument being built right there can easily be explained by the fantastic view from this elevated position. We lingered for quite a while, content in the knowledge of having made it to the equator and reminiscing the journey that brought us there. Taking the boat back to the mainland, our trip through São Tomé and Príncipe came to an end. Far away from well-trodden tourist paths, this island nation is still an unpolished jewel. We sincerely hope that the islands will develop sustainably, protecting as much of their unspoiled nature as possible. If they do, São Tomé and Príncipe won't be a secret much longer.